By the time the schoolmistress reached for Sylvia Treadwell's untouched supper box, every other woman in the Cinder Wells schoolhouse had already been chosen. The room still smelled of coffee, baked apples, lamp smoke, and wool coats dampened by the cooling September night. But the laughter had thinned around Sylvia as if an invisible fence had been drawn between her table and everyone else. She stood with both gloved hands resting on the plain wooden box she had carried in herself. The charcoal grey hood drawn low enough to shadow the old scar along her left cheek and neck. Across the room, men who had paid $1 silver for other suppers leaned over tables with women beside them, trading jokes over ham, preserves, and bread. Two had glanced at Sylvia's box. Neither had stepped forward. The schoolmistress gave her an apologetic smile. "Miss Treadwell, we can put yours aside. There's no sense making you stand here longer." Sylvia tightened one hand around the box handle. It cost the same as every other supper. The schoolmistress hesitated. "I know. Then it stays until the bidding is done." There was no auctioneer, only a chalkboard showing the fixed price. $1 per supper. Proceeds for winter school supplies. Still, the room had managed to make the last box feel like a verdict. Prudence Cress had helped with that. She stood near the back wall in a rust-colored dress, speaking just loudly enough for the nearest men to hear. "Some women bring more trouble than a meal is worth." Sylvia did not turn. Prudence had been telling versions of the same story since spring. Sylvia Treadwell had ruined a fence on another spread. Sylvia Treadwell had let cattle through. Sylvia Treadwell had put a boy in danger. None of the men repeating it could name the ranch. None had been there. That had not mattered much. A rumor needed fewer facts than a fence needed posts. The schoolmistress reached for the box again. "Sylvia." A silver dollar struck the glass jar on the front table with a clean, bright click. The sound carried farther than it should have. Conversation faltered. A tall man in a dark work coat stood beside the jar, one hand resting briefly on its rim. Thaddeus Hume was known in Cinder Wells well enough that nobody needed to announce him. Lantern Draws Foreman. A working cowboy with a habit of finishing sentences only when they deserved finishing. Sylvia had seen him twice before at the hardware counter, and once riding through town behind a loose bunch of yearlings. He had never spoken to her. Now he nodded toward the untouched box. "That one." Prudence gave a short laugh. "You sure, Thad?" He did not look at her. "I can count to one." A few men chuckled, but he did not smile as if he had performed something clever. He took the box from Sylvia only after she released the handle, carried it to an empty table, and pulled out the chair opposite his own. Not beside him. Opposite. "Miss Treadwell?" It was not an order. Sylvia stayed standing another second. Being mocked, she knew how to answer. Being ignored required no answer at all. This was worse in a strange way. Kindness could hide a hook. She had learned that too. "You paid for supper," she said. "That is all. That was my understanding. Not company after. If you want to leave after you eat, you leave." His voice was plain. No wounded pride. No little joke about getting his dollar's worth. Sylvia sat. He waited until she had opened the box before reaching for anything. Inside were slices of cold beef, pickled beans, 2 biscuits, and an apple tart she had bought from the baker, because she did not pretend to possess skills she did not. Thad noticed the tart. "You make that?" "No." "Good." Her eyes lifted. "Good means I do not have to lie if it is bad." A laugh almost escaped her before she stopped it. He cut the tart in half and took the smaller piece. Sylvia noticed that too. "You are Lantern Draws Foreman. For now." Does the ranch pay you to attend school suppers? Not that I have found in the books. Then why this box? There it was, the question she had intended to leave untouched. Thad wiped a crumb from his thumb. Because it was still here. That is pity. No. His answer came too quickly for performance. Pity would have been paying the $1 and handing the supper to somebody else. Sylvia studied him from beneath the edge of her hood. He did not stare into the shadow under it. His attention stayed mostly on her face when she spoke, shifting to the table when she stopped, as though he understood that looking was not the same thing as inspecting. Prudence told you about me, Sylvia said. Prudence tells everybody about everybody. And you believed none of it? I did not say that. That surprised her. What do you believe? That I have not heard enough to decide. The answer settled differently than reassurance would have. It left room for facts. Sylvia lowered her gaze to the beans. Most men decide faster. Most men are in a hurry. And you are not? Usually I am. He took another bite. Just not about people. For several breaths, she could hear the scrape of forks around them, the school stove ticking as iron cooled, boots shifting across plank floorboards. Then the words escaped before she could stop them. Soft enough that she hoped only he heard. No one has ever chosen me before. Thad's fork paused. He did not tell her not to say such things. He did not ask who had hurt her, or offer some grand promise he could not possibly mean after half a supper. He only said, then tonight somebody finally had good sense. Heat reached Sylvia's face under the hood. She blamed the stove, though it stood 20 feet away. Before she could answer, the schoolhouse door slammed open. A young ranch hand stumbled in, breathing hard, hat clutched in one fist. Thad. Every trace of ease left the cowboy's posture. What happened? Road fence below the south rise. Cattle are through. Amos counted 6 head already across, maybe more in the dark. Thad was on his feet before the room fully understood the words. Sylvia stood too. Lantern Draw's road fence ran along the path she used to walk back to her rented room in Cinder Wells. I am going that way. Thad reached for his hat. I can ride you in. I said I am going that way, not that I need carrying. His hand stopped on the hat brim. Fair enough. Outside, the September air had turned sharp. Lantern light followed them, only as far as the schoolhouse steps. Thad led his horse rather than mount while Sylvia walked, and the ranch hand hurried ahead. They found the break less than a mile out, where 3 men were already turning cattle away from the road. One post leaned, but it had not failed. The wire sagged low through dry grass. Thad crouched near it. Could have snapped under pressure. Sylvia stepped past him. No. One of the hands gave her a doubtful glance. You can tell that from here? Yes. She pulled off one glove and knelt. The broken strand had not drawn thin before parting. No long twist, no ragged tearing. She touched the bent end, then followed the wire 6 inches to a second crushed place. Hold the lantern lower. Thad did. No question, no correction. Sylvia turned the wire so the light caught the damaged surface. A shallow crescent had been pressed into the metal near the cut. Deliberate, distinct. She took a small pair of work pliers from her cloth tool roll and removed a short section without disturbing more of the line than necessary. One of the hands frowned. What are you doing? Keeping the part that can answer later. She wrapped the wire in cloth and placed it inside the roll. Thad had gone very still. Sylvia saw it before anyone else did. Not surprise. Recognition. She held out her bare palm. Lantern. He passed it to her. She raised the cut section closer to the light and turned the crescent mark toward him. Wind did not do that. Thad said nothing. Behind them, cattle lowed in the dark while the men began setting a temporary line. Sylvia watched his face rather than the wire. The schoolhouse supper had given her one answer she had not expected. The broken fence gave her a larger question. Thaddeus Hume had seen that mark before, and whatever he knew, he was not ready to tell her. Thad's silence followed Sylvia all the way back to Cinder Wells. He had walked beside his horse until the schoolhouse lights disappeared behind them, then stopped at the corner where the road divided toward Lantern Draw and the row of rented rooms behind Cress Hardware. He had offered to ride her the rest of the distance. She had declined. He had accepted the answer without trying again. That should have made the night easier. It did not. By sunrise, Sylvia had turned the crescent-marked wire over in her mind so many times she could have drawn the damage with her eyes shut. She had not removed it from the cloth tool roll. The short bent section remained wrapped where she had placed it, tucked beneath her work gloves beside a small hammer, pliers, staples, and 2 lengths of binding wire. Evidence was useful only if a person did not become careless with it. At Lantern Draw the next morning, 6 men were waiting beside the damaged south line. Thad stood among them with his coat off and his sleeves rolled above the wrists. He had already reset the leaning post, but had left the cut section untouched, except for the temporary line the hands had strung during the night. That told Sylvia something. He could have repaired it before she arrived. He had waited. "Morning, Miss Treadwell. Mr. Hume." One of the hands shifted his weight. Another looked openly at the tool roll in her hand. Sylvia ignored both. Thad pointed toward the break. "You said last night it was cut. Show us why." "Not tell me. Show us." Sylvia set her roll on a flat stone and crouched by the fence. Wire that fails under steady pull usually draws first. It narrows, twists. Sometimes you get a long, bright stretch before it parts. She indicated the broken strand. This one has none of that. A broad-shouldered ranch hand named Amos frowned. Cattle could have hit it hard. Then the post would tell us. She pressed 2 fingers against the grain. "See the drag here? Old." Dust settled back into it. Last night's cattle did not start this damage. She moved to the severed end, and this edge was pinched before it separated. Thad lowered himself beside her, not crowding. "Angled." "Yes." Amos looked from one to the other. "You saying somebody walked out here and cut Lantern Draw fence for the pleasure of it?" Sylvia rose. "I am saying the wire was cut. Motive belongs to whoever did it." That earned a small grunt from Thad that might have been approval. He looked toward the north line, where fence posts ran across pale grass and low folds of ground. "How long would it take you to look over north and east?" Properly. A day. I will pay you for one." Sylvia studied him. "How much?" One of the men glanced at Thad as if the question itself were bold. Thad only named a fair day wage. Sylvia countered a little higher. "Because if I find a weak repair, you will want me to tell you whether it is age, poor work, or deliberate damage." "Agreed. Sundown ends the day." "Agreed. If you want another, we bargain again." A corner of his mouth moved. "You make everything this hard." "Only things involving my time." "Then we understand each other." They began along the north line before the sun had warmed the frost out of the lowest grass. Sylvia worked ahead, while Amos and another hand followed with staples and a post maul. Thad rode the fence at a distance, checking cattle and returning whenever she stopped. Most of the line was ordinary. Weathered posts, wire stretched and restretched over several seasons. Repairs made by men in a hurry and repairs made by men who cared. Sylvia could tell the difference. Near a shallow draw, She stopped at 3 joined strands and touched the knot with the back of one finger. "Who did this?" Amos answered. "Cobb's crew, I think, last spring." Sylvia examined the next repair, then another, same heavy twist. Too many turns around the standing wire. The work held, but badly. Leander Cobb? Thad had come up behind them. "Yes. What is wrong with it?" "Not enough to fail today," she pointed. "But he twists as if more metal means more strength. It does not. It leaves hard bends beside the join." Amos folded his arms. "Cobb has fenced half the outfits between here and Spearfish. Then half the outfits ought to watch these bends." Amos gave a humorless laugh. "You always this pleasant?" Sylvia looked at him. "Only before noon." Thad coughed into his fist. Amos stared at him. "You laughing?" "No. Sounded like it. Must be dust." They moved on. By midday, Sylvia had found no second fresh cut. That was an answer, though not the one she expected. Whoever had damaged the south line had not worked broadly. One fence, one place. Chosen. She knelt beside a gate brace on the eastern stretch and held out her hand without turning. Glove. Thad, nearest to her, picked up the leather glove she had set on the post and passed it down. Their fingers touched at the cuff. Bare skin against bare skin, no more than a brush. Sylvia felt the warmth of his hand before he released it. He did not turn the contact into a joke, did not let his fingers remain. The absence of presumption unsettled her more than presumption would have. She pulled on the glove. "Thank you. You are welcome." Then he stepped back and asked, "What did you find?" "Work again." She preferred that. Cobb's repairs are concentrated around the boundaries. "Meaning?" "Meaning nothing yet." Sylvia stood and dusted her skirt. "Do not ask me to build guilt out of bad knots." His gaze sharpened. "I did not. No. But you wanted to." For the first time that morning, Thad had no answer ready. Sylvia watched him long enough to confirm what she already suspected. His interest in Leander Cobb was not new. But suspicion was not knowledge, and she refused to turn one man's silence into another man's guilt. At sundown she returned to the ranch yard with sore shoulders, dust on her boots, and no second crescent-cut sample. Thad counted her wage into her palm in full. No deduction for the noon meal Amos had shared from the bunkhouse pot. No claim that the day had produced too little. "Tomorrow?" Thad asked. Sylvia closed her fingers around the coins. "You paid for today." That was not an answer. It was the answer you bought. His mouth almost smiled again. "Fair enough." She collected her tool roll. The original wire sample remained wrapped inside, exactly where she had put it. Then she started toward Cinder Wells before the light disappeared. She had nearly reached the first buildings when a man stepped away from a wagon outside Cress Hardware. Leander Cobb was lean, dark-coated, and older than Thad by several years. A pair of fencing nippers hung among the tools at his belt, ordinary enough at a glance. He looked at the cloth roll under Sylvia's arm. "Still playing fence hand?" Sylvia did not slow. Apparently somebody needs one. His smile vanished before she had passed him. She kept walking, but the question traveled with her into town. Leander had not asked what she was doing at Lantern Draw. He had already known. Leander Cobb already knowing about Lantern Draw bothered Sylvia more than his insult had. By the following morning, she had decided there were only two useful possibilities. Either someone at the ranch had told him she was inspecting fence, or he had been watching closely enough to know without being told. Neither made her eager to see him again. She reached Lantern Draw shortly after sunrise with her cloth tool roll under one arm and the original crescent-marked wire still wrapped inside it. Thad was waiting near the corral. He did not ask whether Cobb had spoken to her in town. Instead, he said, East line failed before dawn. Sylvia stopped. Another cut. That is what I want you to tell me. Amos stood beside two saddled horses, looking less skeptical than he had the day before. Cattle were leaning the fence hard, he said. Could have been pressure this time. Sylvia tied her tool roll behind the saddle Thad had arranged for her and mounted without help. Then the wire will say so. The damaged stretch lay beyond a low rise where grass thinned over stony ground. 5 head of cattle had been turned back already. One post leaned under fresh strain, and a section of wire drooped close to the earth. Amos pointed. There, that is what a hard push looks like. Sylvia dismounted and crouched beside the broken strand. Part of it. Part. She traced the wire backward with 2 gloved fingers. Near the break, one section had an older bend flattened nearly white from repeated strain. Just beside it was a small nick. Not new. Weather had darkened the first cut. The fresh metal showed where someone had worried the same weak point until it separated. Sylvia took off one glove. This did not start last night. Thad crouched on the other side. Explain. Someone damaged it before. Not enough to open the line. Enough to weaken it. She pointed to the older nick. Then somebody came back and worked the same place again. Amos bent nearer. Could cattle have finished what was already bad? Yes. Sylvia looked at him. But cattle did not put the first nick there. The answer landed harder than accusation would have. Thad rose and scanned the open country beyond the fence. So whoever did this wanted it to look natural, or wanted the cattle to finish the job for him. She stood and brushed dust from her skirt. That is cheaper than cutting a whole section in plain sight. Thad turned toward his men. Nobody repairs anything until Miss Treadwell marks what needs replacing. Amos glanced at him. We can string wire. I know. Then why wait? Because she found what we missed twice. Amos said nothing after that. Sylvia did not thank Thad. Public respect did not need gratitude every time it appeared. It needed consistency. She marked the damaged strand, then moved along the line looking for other old nicks. 2 hands followed with staples and replacement wire. When one of them reached past her to tighten a brace she had not approved, Sylvia stopped him. Not that post. It is loose. It is holding the angle. Reset it now, and you change tension down the whole corner. The hand looked toward Thad. Thad had been checking a nearby gate. He did not come closer. You heard her. The man hesitated. She is running the repair. When she is responsible for it, yes. The hand let go of the post. Sylvia finished the inspection before telling him where to set the new staple. By noon, she had 3 fresh observations and no clean answer. The failures were not random, but they were also not identical. Whoever was working the line understood enough to hide deliberate damage inside ordinary wear. That required patience. It also required familiarity with where cattle were likely to press. Thad brought her a tin cup of water near the wagon track. I want to hire you for 2 weeks. Sylvia drank before answering. As what? Line repair. Inspection, whatever name makes you least likely to argue. That is not how wages work. His mouth moved slightly. I expected that. She gave him her day rate. He nodded. Sylvia added, if I am responsible for a section, your men follow my repair decisions unless you overrule me yourself. Agreed. If you overrule me, the responsibility becomes yours. Agreed. I keep my own room in Cinder Wells. That was never in question. Good. 2 weeks. Paid every Saturday. Done. No handshake, no flourish. Just terms. It was more binding to Sylvia than charm would have been. In the afternoon, they reached a corner where an older strand needed replacement. Sylvia set Amos on the anchor post and had another hand feed new wire through while she checked the pull. Thad stood nearby, holding the loose end. "More tension?" he asked. "Not yet." The wind had risen, dry and sharp across the grass. Sylvia leaned closer to inspect the staple line. "Give me 6 inches." Thad eased the wire forward. "Enough." Amos shifted his boots. The strand twitched once. Sylvia saw the recoil a fraction too late. "Hold." The wire snapped free from the temporary grip with a hard metallic whip. Thad moved before the sound finished. His hand closed around Sylvia's upper arm and pulled her sideways out of the strand's path. The wire struck dirt where her shoulder had been. He released her at once. No lingering pressure, no hand sliding lower. Just distance. "You hurt?" "No." Her breath had shortened, but not from pain. Thad looked at the wire, jaw tight. "My grip slipped." "Yes, I am sorry." "Then do not do it twice." "I will try not to." Amos cleared his throat and stared determinedly at the post. Sylvia bent, picked up her glove, and returned to the work. Her arm remembered Thad's hand longer than she wanted it to. Not because he had caught her, because he had let go before she needed to ask. By late afternoon, they had repaired the corner and inspected another half-mile. Sylvia began noticing a different pattern. Wherever Leander Cobb's old work appeared, the repairs clustered near boundaries where pasture narrowed, roads crossed, or neighboring grazing ground came closest. Not every repair was bad. That made it worse. He had worked where access mattered. She unfolded her small repair notebook and marked the locations. Thad saw the marks accumulating. "What are you finding?" "Cobb's work. Bad. Some of it. Only some." Sylvia closed the notebook halfway. "Bad workmanship is not the same as sabotage." "I know. Do you?" His eyes met hers. She reached into her tool roll, but did not remove the wrapped crescent sample. "You knew what that first cut meant, did not you?" Thad's face settled into the same guarded stillness she had seen by lantern light. "I knew it looked familiar. From where, I cannot tell you yet." Sylvia felt irritation rise clean and cold. "Cannot or will not. Will not. Not yet. At least that was honest." Barely. She tied the tool roll closed. "Then do not ask me to accuse Cobb on your silence. I am not asking you to." "Good." Before either could say more, hoofbeats came hard over the rise. A young rider pulled up beside them, horse sweating from the run. Thad. 3 lantern-draw steers found across the north boundary, on Mercer ground. Thad turned toward the distant line, fence down. Not that they saw. Sylvia and Thad exchanged one brief look. The first breach could be blamed on a cut, the second on a weakened strand. But cattle appearing on neighboring ground without an obvious break meant someone might be doing more than damaging wire. Someone might be opening the range on purpose. The 3 lantern-draw steers had crossed onto Mercer ground through a section of fence that looked intact from 20 paces away. That was what troubled Sylvia first. No sagging wire, no broken post, no obvious gap wide enough for cattle to pass. Amos rode the boundary twice before dismounting, muttering that somebody must have left a gate open and closed it again. Sylvia said nothing until she had walked the line herself. The morning was cold enough to silver the grass in the low places. But the sun had already begun burning the frost away from the higher ground. She kept her cloth tool roll tied beneath one arm, the original crescent-marked wire still wrapped inside where it had remained since the schoolhouse night. Thad followed several yards behind with Amos, giving her room to work. At the narrowest point between lantern-draw pasture and Mercer ground, Sylvia stopped. One strand had been twisted back together, freshly. The splice was small enough to disappear in the shadow of a post. "Here." Amos came closer. That would not pass a steer. Not now. Sylvia pressed her gloved thumb against the join. It was open before somebody closed it. Thad crouched on the opposite side of the fence. How long ago? Not long. The wire is bright under the twist. She leaned sideways, studying the cut ends. One had been pinched cleanly. The metal beside it bore a shallow, crescent-shaped crush. Sylvia felt her attention sharpen. She opened the cloth roll and took out the original sample from the first damaged fence, still wrapped in its strip of cloth. She did not hand it to anyone. Instead, she held it beside the newly cut wire without disturbing the second break. Crescent beside crescent. Similar angle, similar crushed edge. Amos exhaled through his teeth. Same tool? Maybe. Sylvia lowered the old sample and wrapped it again. Same sort of damage. That is all I can say. Thad had gone still again. Not the alertness of a foreman seeing trouble. Something older. Sylvia noticed the difference now because she had seen it before. You recognize it. He did not answer immediately. Amos glanced between them. Recognize what? Sylvia kept her eyes on Thad, the crush. Thad stood. I have seen a cut like that before. Where? Not here. That was not my question. Amos shifted backward, suddenly interested in a loose staple several feet away. Thad rubbed a thumb along the side of his jaw. I cannot give you more yet. Irritation came faster this time. You keep saying that as if time is the problem. It may be. No, time does not know things. You do. He accepted the rebuke without flinching. That almost made it worse. Sylvia tucked the evidence sample back into her roll. Then I will keep telling you what the fence says. Nothing more. Fair. And if you know enough to suspect a man, do not put his name in my mouth. I will not. She looked at the splice again. Good. They replaced the compromised section after Sylvia marked the cut, and Amos documented its location in the ranch's ordinary work notebook. No new evidence object was taken. The line itself could remain where it belonged. By midday, Sylvia had the crew stretched along the boundary, replacing 2 old weak joins before cattle pressure could finish what age had begun. Thad worked where she placed him. That surprised Amos more than anything. When Sylvia told Thad to hold the wire lower while she set the brace angle, he did it. When she told him not to pull yet, he waited. You planning to let her run the whole ranch next? Amos asked, from the post hole. Thad did not look up. You planning to learn why this corner failed? Amos grunted and went back to digging. Sylvia set her gloved hand over the stretcher handle and checked the line. Now. Thad took the opposite grip. Their shoulders came close as they leaned into the tension together, not touching at first. Then the back of his coat brushed her sleeve when the wire tightened. A small contact. Ordinary. Neither moved away immediately. Sylvia was suddenly aware of his breathing, steady from the work, and of the heat held beneath his dark shirt despite the cool wind. She disliked noticing it, or perhaps she disliked that she did not dislike it enough. Hold there, she said, holding. His voice was nearer than usual. She fixed the staple, tested the pull, then stepped back first. The distance returned. So did common sense. By late afternoon, they rode into Cinder Wells for replacement wire, staples, and a new gate latch. Sylvia carried her own list and her own money. Thad started toward Cress Hardware with her, but she stopped him outside. Wait here. His brows lifted. Why? Because Prudence will talk differently if she cannot use you as half the conversation. You want me outside? Yes. Then I am outside. No argument. Sylvia entered alone. A brass bell rattled over the door. The hardware store smelled of lamp oil, rope fiber, dust and iron. Bundles of fencing wire stood against one wall. Boxes of staples and hinges filled shelves behind the counter. Prudence Cress looked up from a ledger, then glanced through the window at Thad standing beside the hitch rail. "He sends you in to shop now." "I sent him outside." Prudence's mouth tightened. "That's so." Sylvia placed the list on the counter. 2 coils of wire, 5 pounds of staples, 1 gate latch. Prudence read the list, but did not reach for anything. "You have been busy at lantern drawer." "I have been working." "Same thing, depending who pays." Sylvia set down the coins she had earned. "These pay." Prudence's gaze flicked to them. "You always did like proving you could do a man's work." "No, I like proving I can do mine." The older woman leaned one forearm on the counter. "Leander says you are stirring trouble again." "Leander says many things. He says a ranch lost cattle before because you meddled with a line you did not understand." Sylvia felt the old heat crawl beneath her collar. Not shame exactly, anger worn smooth by repetition. "Which ranch?" Prudence paused. "You know which. Name it." "I do not have time for games." "Neither do I." Sylvia kept her voice level. "You have repeated that story for months. Name the ranch, name the owner, name one person who saw me damage the fence." Prudence's eyes hardened. "People remember trouble, Sylvia. People remember whatever is repeated loudly enough." Prudence looked toward the shadow under Sylvia's hood. Some things are difficult not to remember. There it was, the turn Sylvia had expected. Not work now. Her face. Sylvia reached up with both hands and pushed the hood back herself. Cool air touched the old scar along her left cheek and down her neck. Prudence blinked. Sylvia did not. "You may discuss my work," she said. "You do not get to turn my face into evidence." The store went very still around them. Prudence recovered first, always proud, accurate. Sylvia tapped the list. "My wire." Prudence gathered the supplies with stiff, efficient movements. When she set the latch on the counter, she said, "Ask your cowboy where he learned about those cuts." Sylvia's hand stopped over the coins. "What cuts?" Prudence gave her a thin smile. "The ones he recognized before you did." That was not true. Sylvia had recognized the damage first. But the wording told her Prudence knew Thad's reaction mattered. She paid, gathered the smaller parcel, and arranged for the wire coils to be loaded outside. Thad took the heavier coil only after Sylvia nodded toward it. His eyes rested on her uncovered scar for less than a second before returning to her face. No pity, no false surprise. They walked half a block before he spoke. "She say something about it." Sylvia knew what he meant. "My scar?" "Yes, she tried. You want to tell me how it happened?" "No." "All right." She turned toward him. "You do not mind looking at it?" Thad's answer came without softness added for comfort. "I noticed it the first night." Sylvia waited. And I did not think seeing it gave me the right to ask for the story." The words landed deeper than flattery could have. She pulled the hood back over her head, not to hide, but because the wind had sharpened. Then she looked toward the road leading out to Lantern Draw. "Tomorrow," she said, "you tell me how you know that, Mark." Thad lifted the wire coil onto the wagon. This time he did not say he could not. He only said, "Tomorrow." Thad's promised tomorrow arrived with Leander Cobb leaning against Sylvia's rented room gate before breakfast. He had chosen his hour well. Cinder Wells was awake enough for witnesses, but not busy enough to give her anonymity. A freight wagon creaked past the end of the street. Somewhere behind Cress Hardware, an axe struck kindling in a steady rhythm. Sylvia came down the short steps, with her charcoal grey hood up against the morning cold and her cloth tool roll in one hand. The crescent-cut wire remained wrapped inside it. Leander lifted 2 fingers from the brim of his hat. You are hard to catch alone. That sounds like your inconvenience. His gaze dropped to the tool roll. Lantern drawer still paying you? Yes, poorly, fairly, then I can improve on fair. Sylvia stopped several feet away. She did not like the placement of his body between her and the street, so she shifted until the road was open at her left shoulder. Leander noticed. He moved nothing. Double, he said. For what? Fence work. My crews have more miles than hands. You have been fencing this country for years, which is why I know what good labor costs. You did not seem impressed with mine 2 nights ago. A man can revise an opinion. So can a woman. She waited. Leander's smile thinned. Leave lantern drawers lines alone. Come work mine. There at work. Direction. Sylvia adjusted her grip on the tool roll. Why does my work matter enough to buy? Everybody's work has a price. That was not my question. Maybe I prefer people who know wire. Then you would have hired me in spring. His eyes cooled. Sylvia knew she had found the edge of whatever politeness he had brought with him. You are making more of this than there is. Then it should be easy to explain. Leander glanced toward the hardware store. Prudence stood just inside the window, half hidden behind a display of rope and lantern oil, watching. Sylvia turned back to him. No to double wages. No to leaving lantern drawer because you asked me to. You think Hume is different. From you. From any man using your hands because they are convenient. Sylvia felt anger try to rise. She kept it where it belonged. If Thad Hume stops paying for my judgment, I stop giving it. If he lies to me, I decide what happens next. You do not need to warn me about men as if I have never met one. Leander's jaw tightened. He has not told you then. Sylvia held his gaze. Good morning, Mr. Cobb. She stepped around him. He did not block her. That mattered. So did the fact that he had tried. Lantern drawer lay under a pale blue sky by the time Sylvia reached the north line. Thad was waiting beside a newly set corner brace with Amos and 2 other hands. He read something in her face but asked only, Cobb? Sylvia set down her tool roll. He offered me double wages. Amos whistled. Thad's shoulders hardened. For what? To leave your fences alone and work his. Do you say why? No. What did you say? Sylvia gave him a cool look. You do not pay enough to buy that answer. Amos coughed into his sleeve. Thad almost smiled, then seemed to remember himself. Fair. Sylvia walked to the brace. You promised me something yesterday. The humor left his face. I know. So tell me. He glanced toward the men. Not here. That is already less than you promised. I know that too. Sylvia folded her arms. You are using up a small amount of patience. Thad looked toward the line stretching north. Give me 2 days. You said tomorrow. I was wrong to say it before I knew I could give you the whole truth. That sounds convenient. It is not meant to. Convenience is rarely meant. He absorbed that without defense. 2 days, then no more asking. Sylvia studied him. His refusal irritated her precisely because he had otherwise made room for her decisions. He had paid her fairly, let her direct the crew. Stopped touching when danger passed. Obeyed expertise he could easily have treated as an insult to his rank. That did not purchase trust, but it did earn him one last measure of time. 2 days, she said, not 3, 2. And if I learn first from Leander, Thad's jaw set, then I lose the right to complain about what you decide. Good. She turned toward the brace. Now hold this where I tell you. Amos muttered. That conversation went well. Dig, Thad said. The corner repair required replacing a warped post and drawing 2 strands back into even tension. Sylvia checked the anchor twice before she let anyone touch the stretcher. Too much pull here, and you will bow the next post by winter. Thad took the long handle. Show me. You have used one before, not under your instructions. She gave him a glance. That is nearly wise. Do not spread it around. Sylvia placed her gloved hand over his on the wooden handle and shifted his grip lower. Here, you will feel the load before the post takes all of it. His hand was warm, even through the worn leather of her glove. He did not close his fingers around hers. He simply let her position him. Now pull half. Thad leaned back. The stretcher creaked. The wire tightened with a low metallic hum. Stop. He stopped immediately. Sylvia kept her hand over his while she checked the line. Another inch. He drew. There, the staple went in clean. Amos moved to release the tool. Sylvia should have lifted her hand then. The work was finished. Instead, she left it where it was for one breath longer. Thad did the same. No accident this time. His thumb did not move. Neither did hers. The contact held only because both allowed it. Then Sylvia withdrew first and stepped around the post. Good. Thad cleared his throat. You are not difficult to work for. Sylvia looked over her shoulder. I am not working for you right now. Amos barked a laugh before pretending it had been a cough. By late afternoon, they had reset the corner and replaced 2 weak joins without finding another fresh cut. The absence should have been comforting. It was not. Leander's offer sat in Sylvia's thoughts like a stone in a boot. He had not tried to frighten her away from Lantern Drawer. He had tried to hire her away. Money instead of threat. Cleaner, harder to accuse. Before leaving, Sylvia checked the gate they had repaired near the narrow drawer. The latch seated properly. She tested it twice, then marked the work in her small repair notebook. That one holds, she told Thad. Unless somebody opens it. His eyes rested on the latch. You think they will? I think somebody already knows which places matter. She tied her tool roll closed. And I think you know why. Thad said nothing. 2 days, she reminded herself. She rode back to Cinder Wells before dark. The message reached her after midnight. 3 hard knocks sounded against the door below her rented room. Sylvia pulled on her boots, threw the hood over her hair, and went down to find Amos on the step, breathing hard from the ride. Gate by the narrow drawer, he said. Open. Sylvia stared at him. Broken, no latch damaged. Then someone lifted it. Amos nodded. And 6 head are gone. Sylvia's sleep vanished. The gate she had tested with her own hands had not failed. Someone had opened it after dark. And whoever was doing this no longer needed to hide behind broken wire. By the time Sylvia reached the narrow drawer, the eastern sky had begun to pale, and the missing cattle had already crossed farther than 6 animals ought to have managed by accident. The gate stood open beneath a strip of fading moonlight. Its hinges were sound. The latch hung where Sylvia had set it the previous afternoon, unbent and unbroken. She dismounted, handed her reins to Amos, and walked the opening before anyone spoke. Tracks had churned the dry ground on both sides, but not enough to hide the order of things. Cattle had gone through first. A horse had followed later. 1 horse, possibly 2. Thad crouched beside the gatepost. Could a steer have nosed the latch? Sylvia lifted it once, then let it fall into place. Not unless the steer had fingers. Amos rubbed a hand over his mouth. So somebody opened it, waited for the cattle to cross, then left it standing. Or expected us to find it this way. Sylvia stepped through and followed the hoof marks toward the darker ground beyond the drawer. She did not claim more than the tracks gave her. The cattle had spread. The horse marks stayed nearer the edge. Whoever had come here understood that frightened stock moved farther if pushed from behind. They were encouraged, she said. Thad looked past her toward the neighboring range. Mercer ground starts beyond that rise. The name sat uneasily in the cold air. Lantern Draw had already lost 3 steers across that boundary earlier in the week. 6 more could turn annoyance into a claim for damages. Amos mounted. We can bring them back before noon. Not if they are scattered, Sylvia said, and not if somebody keeps turning them the wrong way. Thad stood. We start now. A rider appeared on the ridge before they had gone half a mile. He came fast and stopped harder than necessary, an older homesteader in a faded brown coat with anger already prepared. Hume. Thad rode forward alone. Mr. Mercer, your cattle are in my hayfield. How many? Enough. That is not a number. Mercer's jaw tightened. 7 I saw, maybe more farther in. Thad glanced once toward Sylvia, then back. Gate was opened during the night. Convenient. True. You expect me to believe somebody keeps breaking your fence just to make your cattle my problem? Sylvia watched Thad's shoulders. He did not flare at the insult. I expect you to believe I am standing here telling you what we found. Mercer pointed toward the ridge. Your stock trample another acre, and I send a damage claim to the owner. I will not argue with a foreman over whether a ghost opened your gate. Give me 1 day. For what? To bring every lantern, draw animal off your ground, and show you where they crossed. Mercer's eyes shifted toward Sylvia. Recognition came with dislike. And she is part of this, Sylvia answered before Thad could. I am the one who checked the gate yesterday. Mercer's mouth hardened. Then perhaps that tells me enough. Thad turned his head slightly toward her, but did not interrupt. Sylvia felt the old accusation try to fasten itself to the present. She refused it. The latch was sound when I left it. It is sound now. Someone lifted it. Mercer gave a short, skeptical breath. You have proof. I have the gate. I have tracks. I have no proof of who touched it. She pointed toward the churned ground. And I will not invent any. That made him pause. Only briefly. 1 day, he said to Thad. After that, I count damage. Fair. Mercer wheeled his horse and rode back toward the hayfield. Amos muttered, Friendly man. Sylvia mounted. He has cattle where he does not want them. Friendliness would be wasted. They divided the search without spreading so far. They could no longer signal one another. Sylvia rode with Thad toward the lower folds, where hoofmarks gathered in softer earth. She did not pretend to be a tracker. Tracks disappeared over stony patches and crossed older sign. What she could read was pressure. A scuffed post. Grass flattened where cattle had balked. Dust disturbed beside a narrow opening between scrub and wire. At one place she stopped and studied a line of hoofmarks turning south. They did not choose this. Thad leaned in his saddle. Why? See how they bunch here. They wanted the broader ground. Something turned them. A rider. Likely. She pointed toward a shallow basin. If you wanted them off Mercer's hay, you would push them toward that draw. And if you wanted them deeper onto his land, you would keep them east until the ground narrows. Thad's face tightened. That is where we are going. By mid-morning they found 4 lantern draw steers mixed with Mercer's cattle near a low swale. Amos and 2 hands eased them west without a chase. Another pair was found near noon. 1 remained missing. Sylvia's shoulders ached from the saddle, and dust had collected along the hem of her skirt. Thad offered water without comment. She drank and handed the canteen back. No softness, no debt, just the next useful thing. They found the last steer near sunset, standing beyond a broken patch of brush with its head down, too tired to resist being turned home. By then, the day had cooled again. The light lay copper across the grass. Amos and the other hands moved ahead with the recovered cattle, leaving Sylvia and Thad to follow at a slower pace. For several minutes, neither spoke. Sylvia could hear leather creak with each step of her horse. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Thad's answer came without delay. "Yes. With the work, yes. With your men, yes. With your cattle, yes." She turned toward him. "Then why does your trust stop at the truth?" His horse kept walking another few yards before he drew rein. Sylvia stopped too. The open country around them was empty enough that his silence felt deliberate rather than crowded. "It does not stop there," he said. "Then give it to me." "I will. You have said that before." "I know. You asked for 2 days. One is nearly gone." His jaw tightened. "I remember." Sylvia studied him. "Leander knew you would not tell me. Prudence knew you would not tell me. That means whatever this is belongs to more than your memory." Thad lowered his gaze to the reins, then back to her. "Yes." A partial answer. It only made the larger question sharper. "Did you help him?" His breathing changed. "Barely. Enough." Sylvia felt the distance between them shrink without either horse moving. "Thad." He dismounted. Not as threat. Perhaps because he could no longer sit still with the question. Sylvia slid down from her saddle and faced him across the narrow strip of grass between them. "If you want my judgment," she said, "you do not get to decide which facts I can bear." "I know. Then stop making me ask." He stepped closer. She did not retreat. The fading light caught the edge of his face, the tiredness around his eyes, the restraint that had once felt simple. It did not feel simple now. Sylvia became aware of his hand near hers, not touching. His gaze dropped to her mouth and returned to her eyes. Her breath caught, but she did not look away. He leaned nearer. So did she. The space between them narrowed to almost nothing. Then Thad stopped, completely. Sylvia could feel the warmth of him in the cooling air. "Why?" she whispered. His voice came low. "'Cause the truth makes me less of the man you think I am." The answer hurt more than refusal would have. Sylvia held his gaze. "Then I should know the man you are before you kiss me." "Yes." He stepped back first. The distance returned, clean and deliberate. "When we get back," he said, "I will tell you everything." Sylvia mounted without asking for help. Everything. Everything. They reached Lantern Draw after dark. Lanterns burned near the barn, and the recovered cattle had been settled behind a sound inner fence. One man stood beside the hitch rail as if he had been waiting long enough to become part of the yard. Leander Cobb pushed away from the post when Thad and Sylvia rode in. His eyes moved from one of them to the other, taking in the distance between their horses. Then he smiled without warmth. "You finally tell her what we did." Leander's question landed harder than a shouted accusation, because Thad did not deny it. He dismounted, handed his reins to Amos, and stood in the lantern wash between Sylvia and the waiting contractor. "You need to leave," he said. Leander's smile widened. "That is not an answer." "It was not meant for you." Sylvia remained beside her horse. Dust from the day clung to her skirt, and the muscles across her shoulders ached from hours in the saddle. None of that mattered now. "Let him stay." Thad turned. "Sylvia?" "He already knows the story." She looked at Leander. "If you are going to use it, you can hear him tell it." Leander shrugged, as if he had been invited to supper. "Suit yourself." Thad's jaw worked once. Then he faced Sylvia. 4 years ago, I was riding range south of here. With him? Yes. Leander leaned against the hitch rail. Dry summer. Thad ignored him. Water was bad. Grass worse. The outfit I worked for had cattle pushing toward a creek behind a small homestead fence. Sylvia said nothing. She needed the whole truth, not pieces offered only when she guessed correctly. Thad continued. The family had fenced their hay and a strip leading down toward the water. We were told to turn the herd north. His voice roughened. Leander said that would cost us half a day and more weight off the cattle. So you cut the fence. Sylvia's words were flat. Thad met them directly. Yes, Leander gave a quiet laugh. We made one opening. You made more than an opening, Thad said without looking at him. We drove cattle through the family's hay. Sylvia felt her fingers tighten around the edge of her tool roll. What happened? Thad inhaled slowly. Their oldest boy came out trying to turn the cattle away from the stacked feed. A steer knocked him down. Was he killed? No. The answer came fast. His leg was broken. He lived. Relief came, but not enough to soften what followed. And the hay? Trampled. Some eaten. Some ruined. Did you pay for it? Thad's silence answered first. No. Did you tell the owner what you had done? No. Did you tell anyone? No. Leander straightened from the rail. We were hands following pressure. Nobody died. Thad's head turned. That is what I told myself. Because it was true. Because it was easier. The words cut cleanly between them. Leander's face hardened. Thad looked back to Sylvia. I left that outfit not long after. I never cut another fence. Never worked for him again. Sylvia glanced toward the dark line beyond the barns. But you never confessed. No. And when you saw the first crescent mark, you knew why it looked familiar. Yes. Because of his nippers. Thad nodded. The lower jaw had a chip even then. It left that crescent crush when it bit hard. Leander's mouth tightened. Plenty of tools get damaged. That is why I did not accuse you. Thad's answer was steady. I recognized the shape. I did not know you were the man cutting lantern drawer now. Sylvia heard the distinction. It mattered. It did not clear him. You suspected him from the first night. Yes, and you let me keep working those lines without telling me your suspicion came from something you had done with him. Yes, no defense, no excuse, just the fact. Anger rose sharper because he had been so careful with every other boundary. He had let her set wages, let her direct men. Asked instead of ordered, stopped before a kiss because he knew truth was owed. Yet for more than 2 weeks, he had accepted her judgment while withholding the one fact that explained his own. You trusted me with your cattle, she said. You trusted me with your crew. You trusted me beside a snapped wire. Thad did not move, but not with the part that might make me think less of you. That is true. So the choice was still yours. Yes. Sylvia swallowed against the heat in her throat. She would not cry here, not for this. That is the part you still do not understand. I think I do now. Do not say that because I am angry. I am not. Leander pushed away from the rail. This is touching, but if we are finished digging up dry bones. Sylvia turned on him. You offered me double wages yesterday. He stopped. Business. To leave lantern drawers lines alone. Still, business. Did you cut them? No. Did you open the gate? No. Then why are you so eager to have me gone? Leander smiled again, but less comfortably. Because a woman who sees conspiracies in fence wire is expensive trouble. You came here tonight to force Thad's confession. Maybe I got tired of watching him pretend to be better than me. Thad stepped forward once, not enough to threaten, enough to end the exchange. Go. Leander's gaze flicked between them. You think telling her makes you clean? No. Good. He mounted and rode out without another word. Only after the hoofbeats faded did Sylvia realize Thad had moved no closer to her. He was giving her the space before she asked for it. That hurt too. I will finish what I agreed to finish tonight, she said. The temporary south line needs checking before I leave. Thad nodded. After that, I am done at lantern draw. His face tightened, but he did not argue. I will have your wages ready. I am not leaving because of wages. I know. Do you? She set the tool roll down and opened it long enough to check that the original crescent-cut sample remained wrapped inside. Still hers. Still where it belonged. Then she closed the roll. You used my expertise while keeping me from understanding why you were watching Leander. Yes, you decided the truth would cost too much. Yes, that is not protection. No. The word came with no hesitation. Thad raised one hand halfway between them, then stopped. Sylvia saw what he meant to do before he did it. Reach for her. Perhaps her hand. Perhaps only her sleeve. She stepped back. His hand dropped immediately. No wounded pride. No appeal. The refusal remained hers. If you want me to believe you have changed, she said, do not prove it to me first. Thad's brow furrowed. Who then? The people you harmed. The sentence seemed to strike deeper than accusation. The family. Yes. I do not know if they are still there. Find out. And if they do not want to hear me, then you will have learned what it means when someone else gets to choose. Thad lowered his head once. All right. Sylvia finished the temporary line with Amos under lantern light, collected the wages already owed to her, and rode back to Cinder Wells alone. Thad did not follow. At dawn the next morning, while Sylvia was still awake in her rented room, Amos saw Thad saddle his horse at Lantern Draw. He was not riding toward Cinder Wells. He was heading south, toward the homestead whose fence he had cut 4 years before. Thad reached the old homestead shortly before noon with dust on his coat and no idea whether the family would let him past the gate. The fence had been rebuilt years ago. Newer posts stood where the old line had once given way, and the hay field beyond them was smaller than he remembered. He sat his horse long enough to feel the old temptation rise. The one that said a man could leave after coming this far and still call himself changed. Then he dismounted and walked to the house. An older man opened the door. Thad recognized him immediately. Age had narrowed his face, but not his eyes. Mr. Hume. Thad took off his hat. You remember me? I remember every rider who came through my hay that summer. No welcome followed. Thad did not expect one. I came to tell you what I should have told you 4 years ago. The man's hand remained on the door. Then say it. Thad did. No drought excuses. No talk of pressure from an outfit boss. No claim that he had only followed Leander Cobb. He told him about cutting the fence after dark, pushing cattle through the opening, watching the herd trample feed that did not belong to them, and leaving before anyone could make him answer for it. When he finished, the older man said, My son spent 6 weeks unable to work. Thad's fingers tightened around his hat brim. I knew his leg was broken. I did not know how long. You did not stay to find out. No. And now I know leaving did not make it smaller. The man studied him. Why come today? Thad could have said conscience. That would have been partly true and partly cowardly. A woman I wronged in a different way told me not to prove I had changed to her first. The older man's gaze sharpened. Different way? I kept truth from her because I was afraid of what it would cost me. And she sent you here? She told me to find out whether the people I harmed wanted to hear me. We did not send for you. I know. A second figure appeared behind the man, younger, broad through the shoulders. His oldest son, Thad realized. No boy now. The memory of him under frightened cattle flashed through Thad's mind. But he kept his eyes where they belonged. On the man standing before him. You came to ask forgiveness, the son said. No. That surprised both of them. Thad reached into his coat and removed a folded paper. I came to tell the truth and make what restitution I can." The paper listed an amount from his savings, another amount he could pay each month from wages, and no condition attached to either. The father took it but did not unfold it. "Money does not undo a broken leg, no, or ruined hay, no, or 4 years of silence, no." The son's mouth tightened. "Then what do you expect?" "Nothing." Thad forced himself not to explain further. Expectation would turn confession into a bargain. The father finally opened the paper. He read the figures slowly. "You can pay this?" "Yes, and if you lose your job over telling your employer—" Thad met his eyes. "Then the payments take longer. They do not stop." The older man folded the paper once. "We will take repayment for the hay and the doctor's expense we carried then." Thad nodded. "All right, but do not mistake payment for forgiveness." "I will not." The son leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "You want to know whether we forgive you?" Thad waited. "That is not something you get to buy." The words struck with almost the same force as Sylvia's. Thad put on his hat, understood. He rode back north by a different road and reached Lantern Draw late the next afternoon. The ranch owner listened in the office without interrupting, while Thad told the same story again. This time, the consequence was immediate. His foreman authority was suspended. Amos would oversee the crew until the owner decided whether Thad still had a place at Lantern Draw at all. Thad surrendered the foreman's account book, the authority to assign men, and the right to give orders beyond his own work. No argument, no appeal to years of service. When the owner asked why he was confessing now, Thad said, "Because waiting until it was safe to tell would make it another lie." In Cinder Wells, Sylvia knew none of that yet. What she did know was that Leander Cobb had started moving men. She saw the first wagon outside Cress Hardware on the second morning after Thad left. 2 coils of fencing wire lay under a canvas, along with fresh posts, staples, and tools. Leander's crew loaded quickly. They did not head south toward the jobs he had been talking about in town. They took the north road. Sylvia stood across the street with a small packet of lamp wicks in one hand and watched until the wagon disappeared beyond the last buildings. Prudence came out to sweep the hardware steps. "You will wear a hole in the road staring like that." Sylvia turned. "Cobb take a new contract north?" Prudence's broom stopped for half a beat. "Leander has contracts everywhere." That was not an answer. "You are no longer working Lantern Draw, are you?" "No." "Then why care where he goes?" Sylvia considered the question. Because the north boundary was narrow. Because Lantern Draw cattle had already been pushed toward neighboring land. Because Leander had offered double wages to remove her from the lines. Because men did not move repair crews before repairs were needed unless they expected something to break. "Professional curiosity," she said. Prudence gave a dry laugh. "That curiosity is what started trouble for you the first time." Sylvia stepped off the boardwalk. "No. Your brother's story started trouble for me. Curiosity only keeps me from swallowing it." She spent the afternoon walking the public road north of town, not entering Lantern Draw property. From a low rise, she could see Cobb's wagon farther off, moving toward the region of the north boundary. Not working yet. Positioning. Preparing. The larger question took shape before she had proof enough to answer it. Leander was not reacting to broken fences. He was arranging himself where the next break would matter most. Thad returned to Cinder Wells near dusk the following day. Sylvia found him outside the livery, brushing road dust from his horse. No foreman's authority showed in the way the stable boy spoke to him. No ranch hand waited for orders. He looked tired, but not defeated. Sylvia stopped several feet away. Did you find them? Yes. Did they hear you? Yes. Did they forgive you? Thad set the brush down. They told me forgiveness was not theirs to sell. Sylvia absorbed that. And the damage? I offered repayment. They accepted a schedule. Your employer? I told him too. She studied his face. Did you lose the foreman job? Maybe. Maybe. I am not foreman right now. They are deciding whether I stay at Lantern Draw at all. Sylvia had expected consequence. She had not expected the answer to feel heavy in her own hands. And if you had known that before you rode south, I would have gone. Even if they never speak to you again? Yes. Even if Lantern Draw sends you away? Thad did not hesitate. The telling? Yes. Sylvia stepped closer. He did not reach for her. That mattered more now than it had before. She looked down at his hand, resting open against the hitch rail, then placed her own over the back of it. No accident. No work requiring contact. Her choice. Thad stayed still beneath her palm. He did not turn his hand over and trap hers. He only let the warmth remain between them until Sylvia decided to lift away. Thank you for going, she said. You did not owe me thanks. I know. She glanced north, where the last daylight had thinned to grey. That is not why I said it. Thad followed her gaze. What happened while I was gone? Sylvia's attention sharpened again. Cobb moved a repair crew north before there was anything to repair. Where? Toward Lantern Draw's north boundary. Thad's face hardened, but he asked the right question. What do you think it means? Sylvia pictured the narrow pasture, the neighboring hay ground, the old weak points, and the places where one opened line could create the largest damage. Then she looked back at him. I think I know where Cobb will cut next. Sylvia spread the hand-drawn sketch across a table in the back room of the livery, because it was the nearest place in Cinder Wells, where nobody would interrupt them every 30 seconds. Thad stood on the opposite side, hat in one hand, stripped of the easy authority he had carried at Lantern Draw. Only days earlier, that absence changed the room more than Sylvia expected. He could still read range, still handle cattle, still stand broad-shouldered enough to make most men think twice before crowding him. But if this plan involved Lantern Draw stock, he could not simply order it done. Good. That was part of the test now. Sylvia placed one finger on the north pasture. Cobb does not need to cut every fence. Thad leaned over the sketch. Only this one. Yes, the pasture narrowed between a rocky fold and Mercer's hay ground. One pressure point, one opening, enough cattle through it at night. And by morning Lantern Draw would look careless again. More damages, more angry neighbors, more emergency work for the man who always seemed ready with wire and a crew. Thad traced the route with one knuckle, but did not touch the paper itself. He cuts here, pushes the first bunch east, and lets the rest follow. If he wants damage, yes, and then offers to repair the line. After he has made sure everyone believes Lantern Draw cannot manage its own boundary. Thad's mouth hardened. He gains the work and weakens the outfit, and strengthens Prudence's story about me if I happen to be anywhere near the fence when it happens. He looked up. Then you do not have to be. Sylvia held his gaze. That is not your decision, I know. No argument, no correction. She tapped the sketch again. We make the section look worth cutting. How? Repair it visibly. Let Cobb see fresh work. Leave the adjoining wire ordinary. Move the main cattle south before dark. He will notice the pasture is empty. Not if we leave a small group near the line. Thad frowned. Enough to tempt him. Few enough that a break does not become a stampede. And men hidden where? Sylvia pointed to a shallow rise west of the boundary. One there. Another downwind near the dry wash. You, at the brace point. His eyes narrowed. That is where the wire moves if he cuts it. Which is why I need to be there. Thad started to answer, then stopped himself. Sylvia saw the old instinct arrive and get turned aside before it became an order. "What do you need from me?" he asked instead. The question warmed her more than she wanted. You move cattle if the line opens. You do not chase Cobb unless the lawman says to, even if I can catch him. Especially then. Thad nodded once. All right. And we need a witness who is not lantern drawer. County deputy? Yes, Deadwood. Sylvia folded the sketch. Then we go to Deadwood. They rode to lantern drawer first, because the plan could not exist without permission from whoever held authority there. Amos met them near the barn. But he no longer took instructions from Thad. An older ranch representative, Mr. Talbot, was keeping temporary oversight while the owner decided what to do about the foreman position. Sylvia explained the pattern herself. No appeal to romance. No appeal to Thad's reputation. Only the cuts, the opened gate, Cobb's repair crews, and the vulnerable north line. Talbot listened with his arms folded. You are asking me to bait a man into damaging my fence. No, Sylvia said. I am asking you to protect the cattle, make the likely target visible, and put witnesses where they can see whether he chooses to damage it. And if he does not come, then you lose one night, and if he comes armed, then nobody confronts him without the deputy. Talbot looked at Thad. You agree with this? Thad answered without reaching for authority he no longer had. I think her reading of the line is right. Would you do it her way? Yes. Even the part where you stand with cattle instead of running after Cobb. Thad glanced at Sylvia, then back, especially that part. Talbot was silent long enough to make Sylvia think he would refuse. Then he exhaled through his nose. Move the main herd south tomorrow afternoon. Leave 10 head near the north section. Amos takes my orders until this is finished. Sylvia nodded. That works. And you? He asked her. I am not on lantern draw wages right now. You want wages for this? Yes, Talbot almost smiled. Good. Means you are thinking straight. They agreed on a 1-day rate for preparation and another if the watch extended beyond the first night. Separate from Thad. Separate from any promise afterward. By noon the next day, Sylvia and Thad were riding toward Deadwood. The road took hours, climbing and bending through rough Black Hills country where distance could not be hurried, simply because a plan felt urgent. They left early enough to reach town before the county offices closed, and Sylvia kept the original crescent-cut wire wrapped in her cloth tool roll behind the saddle. She did not surrender it in Cinder Wells. Not yet. At Deadwood, they asked for a county deputy willing to witness an expected act of property damage. The man who finally heard them was older than Sylvia expected, and less impressed by speculation than Thad probably hoped. You have seen this Cobb-cutting fence? He asked. No, Sylvia said. Then, what have you got? Repeated deliberate damage. The same visible crush pattern on 2 cuts. An opened gate, cattle pushed onto neighboring ground, and Cobb's repair crew moving toward the one section that would cause the most damage if opened. That is suspicion. Yes, and you want me to sit in the dark for it. For 1 night. The deputy looked at Thad. You the lantern draw foreman? Not presently. Why not? Thad did not evade. Because I admitted helping Cobb cut another family's fence 4 years ago. The deputy's attention sharpened. Sylvia said nothing. This was Thad's truth to carry. He gave the short version, no excuses. When he finished, the deputy said, That makes you either a poor witness or an unusually honest one. Could be both. The deputy nearly smiled. 1 night. If I see nothing, I leave at dawn. Fair, Sylvia said, and nobody plays lawman before I move. Agreed. They left Deadwood late enough that the returning road had already gone gold with evening. They could not reach Lantern Draw before full dark without pushing the horses harder than necessary. So, they stopped near a spring-fed hollow where the animals could drink and breathe. Sylvia dismounted stiffly. 2 long rides in as many days had settled into her hips and lower back. Thad loosened his horse's cinch, then stepped away rather than assume she needed help with hers. She handled the saddle herself. That mattered too. You told him everything, she said. Thad looked over. Enough for him to understand why I recognized Cobb's work. You could have hidden it. Not from him. You hid it from me. Yes, no defense. Again, Sylvia set her hat against the saddle horn and pulled back her hood. Evening air touched the scar along her cheek. I have been trying to decide whether what you did this week fixes what you did before. Thad's face went still. It does not. No. He accepted that too. But I believe what you did this week. His eyes lowered briefly, then returned to hers. Sylvia stepped closer. Not all the way at first. Enough that he could move if he chose. He did not. She closed the last distance herself and put her arms around him. Thad stayed motionless for 1 heartbeat, as if waiting to be sure. Then his arms came around her back, firm, warm, nothing taken, nothing hurried. Sylvia rested her cheek against his chest and heard the slow beat beneath his shirt. She had thought forgiveness might feel like forgetting. It did not. She remembered everything. She simply no longer felt alone with it. I did not forget what you did 4 years ago, she said. I know, and I will not pretend it did not matter. I would not ask you to. Good. She stayed in his arms another breath, then another, before stepping back on her own. No kiss, not yet. Thad let her go without trying to hold the moment longer. The road ahead was already darkening, and tomorrow night would decide whether Sylvia had read Leander Cobb correctly or merely built a pattern out of anger and wire. The deputy had given them 1 night. By the time Sylvia and Thad reached Lantern Draw the next morning, Amos had already moved the main herd south. On the north line, fresh repair work gleamed in the sun like an invitation. The fresh repair on the north line had been made to look worth ruining. Sylvia checked it twice before sunset. The brace post stood firm. The adjoining strands carried ordinary wear, 10 lantern. Draw cattle grazed in the pasture beyond, far enough from the fence to stay calm, but near enough to make the section attractive to anyone hoping to cause trouble. The rest of the herd had already been moved south under Amos's direction. Nothing about the plan depended on panic. That was the point. The county deputy arrived before dark and tied his horse in a shallow wash where the animal could not be seen from the road. He wore no expression of excitement. Sylvia appreciated that. Men who enjoyed traps too much were often worse at them. Positions again, he said. Sylvia pointed toward the low brace where the terrain dipped. I stay there. If the strand is cut, I can control the release before it drops into the cattle. The deputy looked at Thad. And you, Thad answered, with the cattle. You see Cobb, you do not run at him. I heard you the first time. Good. Hear me a second. Thad nodded. He had no foreman authority to fall back on tonight. No crew under his command. He was here because Sylvia's plan required a man who knew Lantern Draw cattle, and because the ranch had agreed to let him help. That difference mattered. Sylvia carried her cloth tool roll beneath the charcoal grey hood she had drawn up against the cold. The original crescent-cut wire sample remained wrapped inside, untouched, since she had compared it with the second damaged line. She checked the knot once, not because she doubted herself, because evidence stayed useful only when a person knew where it was. Dusk settled slowly over the grass. Amos withdrew with the last of the visible ranch hands before full dark, leaving the north fence apparently unattended. The deputy took position behind a low rise west of the boundary. Thad disappeared toward the cattle. Sylvia crouched near the brace point with the stretcher, gloves, and a short length of replacement wire beside her. Then they waited. The first hour gave them nothing but cold. Wind moved over the grass in long breaths. The cattle shifted, settled, and shifted again. Sylvia could not see Thad clearly, only the occasional outline of a mounted man when the moon caught him. Once she heard a horse stamp. Once the deputy coughed into his sleeve. Nothing else. The longer they waited, the more the living question tightened around the night. Had she read Leander correctly? Or had anger taught her to see intention where there was only coincidence? Midnight approached. The wire made one soft metallic complaint. Sylvia's body went still, not wind, too localized. A second sound followed, leather against metal, then the faint scrape of a boot near the fence. She did not move. A shadow separated from the darkness on the far side of the line. Another remained with two horses farther back. Leander Cobb stepped close enough for moonlight to catch the edge of his coat. He touched the fresh repair with one gloved hand, testing the tension. Sylvia could hear her own breathing under the hood. He knew what he was looking for. Leander bent. A tool flashed once. Nippers. The first bite did not sever the wire. It crushed it. He adjusted his grip and bit again. The strand snapped. The deputy rose from behind the ridge. "That is enough, Cobb." Leander froze. For half a second nobody moved. Then the cut strand began to sag toward the pasture. One of the cattle startled and turned. Sylvia moved immediately. Not toward Leander, toward the brace. She hooked the stretcher onto the loose end and leaned her weight into the handle before the wire could drop farther. "Thad," she called. "Move them south." Hoofbeats answered. Thad came out of the dark, behind the small cattle group, turning his horse broadside to guide them away from the failing line. Leander looked from the deputy to Sylvia, as if he could not decide which threat mattered more. "You set this?" Sylvia kept both hands on the stretcher. "You cut it. You baited me. You still cut it." The hired rider behind him wheeled his horse. The deputy pointed. "Stay where you are." The rider hesitated, then raised both empty hands away from the reins. Leander did not. He threw the nippers toward the grass and lunged for his horse. The deputy moved to intercept, but Leander shoved hard enough to stagger him. Thad had already cleared the cattle from the fence line. He could have ridden after Leander. Sylvia saw the choice before he made it. "Thad, hold the herd," she shouted. His horse turned toward Cobb by instinct. Thad checked it, stayed with the cattle, obeyed her plan. The deputy recovered and caught Leander near the saddle, one hand on his coat. Leander twisted free again and ran along the fence instead of toward the open road. That mistake brought him close to Sylvia's position. She released one notch of the stretcher, shifted behind the brace, and gave him space rather than trying to stop him herself. Thad, seeing the danger now that the cattle were secure, dismounted and moved between Leander and Sylvia. No gun, no charge, just a solid body in the path. "Move," Leander snapped. "No." Leander shoved him. Thad planted his boots. The second shove turned into a grapple. Their shoulders hit the loosened strand. Wire scraped across Thad's glove and forearm before he wrenched himself free of it. He hissed but stayed upright. The deputy reached them a heartbeat later, pulled Leander back, and forced both his hands behind him. Enough. This time Leander stopped fighting. The hired rider remained mounted with his hands visible. Sylvia tightened the stretcher again, secured the strand temporarily, and only then stood. Her knees had begun to shake. Not fear now, release. The deputy retrieved the nippers from the grass. One jaw showed a visible chip. Thad saw it and said nothing. He did not need to. Sylvia opened her cloth tool roll and removed the wrapped wire sample from part 1 for the first time that night. She held it by the cloth, then opened the wrapping beneath the deputy's lantern. This came from the first cut on Lantern Draw's road fence. The deputy compared the crescent-shaped crush on the wire with the chipped nipper jaw. Looks close. Sylvia nodded. It supports what we saw tonight. It does not prove every earlier cut by itself. The deputy glanced at her. Good answer. It is the true one. He took the sample only after asking, You ready to give this over? Sylvia looked at the bent piece of wire that had travelled with her through every suspicion, every argument, every partial answer. Then she placed it in his palm. Yes. The deputy wrapped it again, this time in his own evidence cloth, and tucked it into his satchel with the nippers. The transfer was complete. Sylvia no longer possessed the original sample. Leander watched her with a face emptied of charm. You think this makes you right about everything? No. About your old trouble? No. Then what does it make you? Sylvia pulled her hood back against the cold. Right about tonight. Dawn came grey and thin over the north pasture. The deputy had taken Leander and the hired rider toward town before sunrise, leaving Amos to help restore the damaged section. Thad sat on an overturned fence bucket while Sylvia cleaned the shallow wire cuts along his forearm. The glove had taken most of it. The skin beneath was scraped and bleeding in 2 narrow lines, painful but not serious. You can move your fingers, she asked. He flexed them. Yes, grip? He closed his hand, slower this time. Enough. Do not prove anything with it today. Was not planning to. Sylvia wrapped the forearm with clean cloth. He watched her hands but did not reach for her. You all right? He asked. Yes. You sure? Yes. She tied the bandage and sat back on her heels. For several breaths, they listened to Amos hammering a staple farther down the line. Thad said, You were right about the north fence. We were lucky he came the first night. That too. And you stayed with the cattle. He nodded. You told me to. You wanted to go after him. Yes, but you stayed. Yes. Sylvia looked at him. Weeks ago, she might have measured that obedience as a small thing. Now she knew what it cost a man like Thad to stand still when action promised quicker satisfaction. He had done more than restrain himself. He had trusted her judgment when the stakes were highest. Thad, what? She stepped closer. He rose, but stopped before entering her space. Sylvia put one hand lightly against his uninjured arm. He did not move. She gave him enough time to refuse, though she knew from the way his breath caught that he would not. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Brief, warm, chosen. Thad's free hand came to rest lightly at her waist only after she had closed the distance. And even then, he held her as if answering rather than taking. When Sylvia drew back, he let her go. No second kiss. No claim. Just the look of a man who understood what had been given. That, she said, was not for catching Cobb. Good. It was for doing what I asked, when it mattered. Thad's mouth curved. I can live with that. By the time they rode back towards Cinder Wells, Leander Cobb was already under county custody, and the chipped nippers were no longer his. The truth of the sabotage had witnesses now. But as Sylvia reached the first buildings of town, She saw Prudence Cress standing outside the hardware store, speaking to 3 women and 2 ranch hands. Prudence turned as Sylvia approached. Her voice carried cleanly across the street. Cobb did what he did because that woman baited him. Sylvia drew rein. The physical danger was over. The old story was not. Prudence's accusation crossed the street before Sylvia had fully dismounted. Cobb did what he did because that woman baited him. 3 people turned toward Sylvia. 2 did not. Thad came up behind her with his forearm wrapped beneath his coat sleeve, the fresh bandage showing white at the cuff. He said nothing. Good. Sylvia did not need him to answer for her. Prudence stood on the hardware store step with her arms folded. You laid a trap, she continued. You made Leander walk into it. Sylvia handed her reins to the livery boy. He walked to a fence with nippers in his hand. Because you arranged the whole thing. Yes. Prudence blinked. You admit it. I arranged for witnesses to watch the fence I believed he would cut. Sylvia stepped onto the boardwalk. Then he cut it. One of the ranch hands near Prudence shifted his weight. Deputy saw him. Yes. With the tool? Yes. Prudence's face sharpened. Tools prove nothing. Every fencing man carries nippers. Sylvia nodded. That is why the deputy did not arrest him for owning a tool. He saw him use it. Prudence opened her mouth, but hoofbeats interrupted her. The county deputy rode into Cinder Wells, leading Leander's horse. Leander himself was not with him. That answered one question before anyone asked. The deputy dismounted and tied his reins. Cobb is being held pending a formal complaint and further inquiry, he said. His hired man is giving a statement. Prudence came down one step. Held where? Not here. On what authority? The deputy's expression did not change. The counties, it was enough. He looked toward Sylvia. I need statements from you, Hume, Amos, and whoever represented Lantern Draw last night. Mr. Talbot, Thad said. He is at the ranch. Send for him. Sylvia glanced toward the schoolhouse. You need a room. Somewhere with a table. The schoolmistress, standing near the doorway across the street, raised one hand. Use mine. Within an hour, the schoolhouse held a different kind of gathering than the supper had. No music, no boxed meals, just a table, 4 straight-backed chairs, the deputy's satchel, and people coming in one at a time to tell what they knew. Sylvia noticed the satchel immediately. The original crescent-cut wire sample was inside it now, along with Leander's chipped-jaw nippers. She did not touch either. They had passed into county custody at the north fence. Their location was no longer hers to control. Mr. Mercer arrived first. He was still angry about the cattle that had crossed onto his land, but his anger had become precise. Lantern Draw cattle entered my hay ground twice, he said. The second time, Hume gave me his word they would be removed in a day. They were. The deputy asked, Did Miss Treadwell tell you she knew who opened the gate? No. Did she accuse Cobb then? No. Said she had no proof of who touched it. Sylvia felt Prudence shift near the rear wall. The deputy continued. Did she claim the damage was accidental? No, said the latch had been lifted. Anything else? Mercer looked toward Sylvia. She told me she would not invent what the ground could not prove. It was not praise. Sylvia preferred that. Facts lasted longer. Amos came next. He explained the first cut, the later repaired section, the opened gate, and Sylvia's insistence that the crew not call bad workmanship sabotage without proof. Then Mr. Talbot arrived from Lantern Draw and confirmed that Sylvia had warned him about the north line before the final incident. She asked permission to move the cattle south and leave a small group near the boundary, he said. Hume had no foreman authority at the time. She brought the plan to me herself. The deputy wrote several lines, sanded the page, and turned to Thad. Your statement now. Thad sat with his injured forearm resting loosely across one thigh. The bandage remained clean but visible. Sylvia had expected him to speak only about the previous night. He did not. I recognized the crescent damage before Miss Treadwell knew why I reacted to it, he said. Prudence's eyes narrowed. The deputy glanced up. How, 4 years ago, I helped Leander Cobb cut a homesteader's fence during a dry spell. A murmur moved through the room. Thad did not turn toward it. We pushed cattle through. Damaged hay. A boy broke his leg in the trouble. The deputy's pencil paused. You reported that? No. You paid damages then? No. And now I found the family. Told them. Set repayment from my savings and wages. Prudence gave a bitter laugh. So this is the man everyone is supposed to believe? Sylvia turned toward her. Thad spoke first, but not in defense of himself. No one is asking them to believe I was always right. His voice stayed level. They are asking whether Cobb cut the north fence last night. The deputy saw him do it. That mattered more than Sylvia expected. Thad did not build her innocence on his goodness. He separated the truths. One could remain ugly without poisoning the other. The deputy finished his questions and closed the notebook. I will carry these statements back. Cobb remains held while the complaint moves forward. Prudence stepped nearer the table. And what about her? Sylvia faced her. What about me? You think one night erases what happened before? Which thing before? Prudence's mouth tightened. The fence you ruined, the cattle you let through. The injury. The accusation had followed Sylvia for months, always shapeless enough to survive. This time, she did not defend herself with a speech. She asked one question. What proof did you ever have? Prudence frowned. Everybody heard what happened. That is not proof. Leander knew the ranch. Which ranch? Prudence hesitated. You know perfectly well. Name it. A woman near the stove shifted closer, listening now. Prudence looked toward the deputy as if his presence might rescue her from the question. It did not. Sylvia repeated. What proof did you ever have? Prudence's face reddened. Leander told me. No. You spoke to the owner? No. You saw a damaged fence? No. A statement? A bill? A witness? No. Each answer stripped weight from the rumor without Sylvia adding any drama. Prudence's shoulders drew back. He is my brother. Yes. I had reason to believe him. You had a reason to believe him. You did not have proof to condemn me. Prudence's gaze flicked toward Sylvia's hood. Sylvia pushed it back herself. Cold air touched the old scar along her cheek. My face never made your story true either. Prudence did not answer. No one applauded. No one apologized on behalf of the town. The schoolmistress simply moved a chair out of the way and said, Sylvia, I will need women for the next school supper in spring. If you want a place, there is one. Sylvia gave her a small nod. Thank you. Ordinary inclusion. It was enough. By the third day after Leander's arrest, Lantern Draw made its decisions too. Thad was allowed back on the payroll for the rest of autumn, but not as foreman. Amos would continue supervising the crew. Thad accepted the arrangement without protest. You earned trust once, Mr. Talbot told him. You will earn it again. Fair. Sylvia received a separate offer. 2 weeks to finish the damaged north line and inspect every vulnerable gate before winter. Her own wage. Her own authority over the repair crew. Mr. Talbot asked, You want it? Sylvia considered the work, not Thad. Yes. On the evening she accepted, she and Thad walked from the schoolhouse toward the livery beneath a sky already carrying the first hard edge of autumn frost. His injured forearm remained wrapped, though the bandage was thinner now. He kept the hand at his side. With the other, he held it open between them. An offer, nothing more. Sylvia placed her hand in his and threaded her fingers through his. Thad's grip closed only after hers did. They walked half the block that way before either spoke. "I may take a spring cattle job elsewhere," he said. Sylvia turned her head. "Because lantern draw may not restore you, because they may not. And I will need work. Where? Could be north, could be closer to spearfish." Nothing settled. For the first time since she had met him, the road away might belong to Thad rather than Sylvia. The thought unsettled her in a new place. "If lantern draw offered you the foreman job back tomorrow," she asked, "would you stay?" Thad slowed. Their hands remained joined. "That depends on a question I have not earned the right to ask yet." 3 days after Sylvia asked whether Thad would stay if lantern draw wanted him back, Mr. Talbot sent for them both. The message reached Sylvia while she was resetting a gate hinge on the east line, and, because the work was hers, not Thad's, she finished driving the last staple before she saddled up. By the time she reached the ranch office, the morning frost had burned off the grass, and Thad was already waiting outside. The bandage on his forearm was gone. 2 shallow healing lines crossed the skin where the wire had caught him, still red enough to show, but no longer limiting the hand. He flexed his fingers once when Sylvia noticed. "I did not ask. You were about to." "Maybe," he almost smiled. Then Talbot opened the office door. The discussion did not take long. Lantern Draw wanted Thad back as foreman, not because Cobb had been caught, not because one confession erased another failure, because Thad had worked without authority for several days, taken orders from Amos without complaint, kept the cattle moving, and continued the repayment arrangement he had promised the family he had harmed. Talbot said it plainly. "You lost the position because trust was damaged. You get it back because your conduct since has been better than your excuses would have been." Thad stood with his hat in his hands. Understood. Same wages as before. All right. And Miss Treadwell's repair work remains separate. You do not become her employer by getting your position back. Thad glanced toward Sylvia. "I would not ask for that." Sylvia answered before Talbot could. "Good." Talbot looked between them and grunted. "Then we are finished." Outside, Thad put his hat on and drew a breath that seemed to go deeper than the ones he had taken inside. "You are foreman again," Sylvia said. "Seems that way." "How does it feel? Like more work?" "That is not what I meant." "I know." He leaned one shoulder against the porch post. "It feels better because I did not get it back by pretending the old thing never happened." Sylvia understood that. There were repairs that hid damage, and repairs that held because the weak place had been exposed first. She had built enough fences to know the difference. Thad straightened. "Ride the north line with me? As foreman?" "No." "As what?" He considered the question. "As Thad." Sylvia let him wait a little. "All right." They saddled their horses and rode north beneath a clear October sky. The repaired boundary ran clean over the folds of grass. New staples bright in places where old iron had been replaced. Sylvia stopped twice to check tension. Thad did not offer advice. He held the horse when she needed both hands and moved only when asked. On the second stop, she noticed that the old crescent-cut wire sample no longer lived in her tool roll. The empty fold in the cloth remained, but the evidence itself was in county custody with Leander's nippers. That chapter had changed hands. Good. She did not need to carry proof forever. They reached the rise, overlooking the narrow pasture where Cobb had made his final cut. The 10 cattle used in the trap were gone now, returned to the main herd. The ground looked almost ordinary. That unsettled Sylvia more than wreckage would have. Trouble could leave without taking all its marks with it. Thad dismounted and loosened his horse's reins over a post. Sylvia did the same. "You asked me a question the other night," he said. "I asked whether you would stay. Yes, and I gave you half an answer. You said there was another question you had not earned the right to ask. There is." Sylvia folded her arms. "Then ask it." He did not immediately. His face held none of the guarded delay that had once kept truth from her. This was different. He was choosing words rather than hiding them. "I am not asking you to stay because I can give you lantern draw," he said. "It is not mine. I know. I do not have land to offer you. I have wages, a horse, some savings, and a reputation I am still rebuilding. You forgot an injured arm." He glanced down at the healing cuts, mostly serviceable, barely. Cruel woman, accurate woman. A small laugh escaped him, then faded. "I am serious, Sylvia. So am I." He stepped closer, but left a clean space between them. "If spring takes your work somewhere else, I do not get to decide that for you. If lantern draw keeps me here, that does not mean you belong here too." Her throat tightened, not from fear, from the fact that he understood the difference now without needing her to teach it again. "All right. And if you do take work somewhere else, I may still want you." Sylvia's breath slowed. Thad's voice did not grow grander. It became plainer. "I love you, Sylvia." The words arrived without promise of property, without an audience, without a dollar changing hands. They were not payment, not rescue, not reward. Sylvia looked at the man who had once hidden his worst truth because he feared losing her respect, then had gone back and told it where it could cost him most. She had seen him obey when his body wanted to chase, seen him lose authority and work anyway, seen him take blame that belonged to him and refuse blame that belonged to her. Evidence accumulated over time. "If spring work sends me to another outfit," she asked, "would you still love me?" "Yes." "If it is north of here?" "Yes." "If I refuse a job you think I should take?" "Yes." "If I tell you a brace is wrong?" His mouth moved. That might test the whole arrangement. Sylvia raised one brow. "Thad." Yes, he meant it. She knew he did. That certainty did not frighten her the way being chosen once had. She stepped into the space between them. "Then I love you too." Thad closed his eyes briefly, as if the words had struck somewhere deep enough to require stillness. When he opened them, Sylvia put one hand against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her palm. He did not move first. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. Not the brief dawn kiss after Cobb's capture. This one carried no danger behind it and no unfinished confession waiting ahead. Thad answered slowly, one hand settling at her waist and the other remaining loose at his side, because the healing forearm still pulled when he bent it. Sylvia stayed close because she wanted to. When the kiss deepened, it remained gentle, deliberate, and fully hers to continue. She rested her forehead against his afterward, breathing hard enough to hear herself. "That was not for getting your job back," she said. "Good. Or for paying restitution. Also good. Or for listening to me about fences. That one hurts." Sylvia laughed against his coat. Thad's hand tightened once at her waist, then eased. "What is it for?" he asked. "For being the man who finally learned that loving me does not give you the right to steer me." His expression softened, but he did not turn the moment into a speech. "Fair." Sylvia stepped back enough to see him clearly. "I am not promising to stay in Cinder Wells forever. I know. I am not promising marriage. I know. I want the winter." Thad waited. What about it? Caught me through it. His face changed then, not shock. Relief stripped of triumph. All right, and in spring we decide what comes next. Together, if we both still want the same road. I can live with that. They rode back towards Cinder Wells near sundown, not side by side every mile because the trail narrowed in places, but close enough that neither had to wonder whether the other was still there. Outside Cress Hardware, Sylvia noticed a fresh school notice nailed beside the door. Spring Supper Fund. Volunteers wanted. Beneath the heading were several names. Hers was there among them, written in the same hand and the same size as all the rest. No explanation, no apology, no mark separating her from anyone else. Sylvia read it once, then pulled her hood forward against the cold wind. Thad waited without asking what she felt. She turned toward him. Come spring, you may have to pay another $1. For supper, if you are lucky. Expensive courtship, Sylvia mounted. You can always leave the box. Thad swung into his saddle beside her. Not likely. By March, Thad had paid for supper often enough that Sylvia no longer counted the coins. Winter had done what winter always did in Dakota Territory. It stripped the range down to what held. Fence posts that had looked sound in October leaned under frozen ground. Weak wire parted. Good repairs stayed good. People did much the same. Thad kept his foreman position at Lantern Draw through the cold months. Not because anyone forgot what he had done 4 years earlier, but because he worked without pretending the confession had made him noble. He sent his agreed payments south when they were due. He took Amos's opinion when Amos had the better one. He never once used his restored authority to direct Sylvia's work. Sylvia, for her part, spent the winter taking small repair jobs wherever the pay was fair, and the terms were plain. By late February, 2 neighboring outfits were asking for her before they asked who could spare a man. That pleased her more than praise would have. Work had a way of exposing false reputations. A fence either held or it did not. Her face had nothing to do with it. The old scar along her left cheek had not faded. She had stopped needing it to. The deeper cuts belonged elsewhere now. Leander Cobb remained under county process. After the deputy's witnessed account, the seized chipped-jaw nippers, the fence damage, and the statements from Lantern Draw and Mercer. Sylvia heard pieces when news traveled through Cinder Wells, but she did not chase every detail. The original crescent-cut wire sample was still in county custody. It no longer belonged in her tool roll, and she had learned not to build a life around carrying evidence after it had done its work. Prudence Cress still opened her hardware store each morning. She did not apologize. Sylvia had not expected her to. What changed was smaller and more useful. People stopped repeating Leander's old accusation as if repetition made it fact. Men who once refused to hire, Sylvia began asking what she charged per day. Women who had avoided sitting beside her at gatherings began speaking to her as if there had never been a wall between them. Sylvia remembered the wall. She simply stopped leaning against it. The next school supper was held on a cold March evening while patches of old and snow still survived in the shadows north of buildings. The wind came hard enough down the street that Sylvia wore her charcoal grey hood over her hair and tucked the blue-stitched edge close beneath her chin. 5 months earlier, she had entered the same schoolhouse with a supper box in her hands and watched every other woman get chosen first. Tonight, she carried another box, but she did not stand beside it, waiting to see whether anyone wanted what was inside. She set it with the others, helped move benches, and spent 10 minutes showing the schoolmistress's nephew why a loose hinge needed a leather washer instead of another nail. "You work at supper too?" a voice asked behind her. Sylvia turned. Thad stood with one bench balanced against his hip, his coat dusted with cold. The shallow wire cuts on his forearm had healed months ago. Only pale lines remained when his sleeve rode up. "Somebody has to keep this building from falling around you." "I was hoping education would do that." "Education cannot fix a hinge." "Then I wasted a winter learning letters." She smiled before she could stop herself. Thad noticed. He always noticed. He did not make the smile bigger by pointing it out. "Where do you want this?" he asked, nodding toward the bench. Sylvia pointed to the east wall. There, he carried it there. No argument, no unnecessary display of strength. Just the work. By the time the room filled, Sylvia had removed her hood. She folded it once along the blue stitching and placed it inside her now empty supper box beneath the table. Not hidden, not displayed. Simply put away because the room was warm. The schoolmistress began collecting the $1 contributions into a glass jar on the front table. Sylvia watched men and women step forward in pairs, in families, alone. No bidding, no whispers about who was worth the price. Just supper and school money. Thad was across the room helping an older ranch hand with a stubborn coat button when Sylvia walked to him. He turned before she spoke. "Are you eating with me?" she asked. His brows rose a fraction. "If I am invited?" "You are." "Then yes." They approached the jar together. Sylvia took $1 silver from her purse. Thad took another from his pocket. 5 months earlier, the single bright click of his coin against glass had sounded louder than the whole room. Tonight Sylvia dropped hers first. Thad's followed. 2 separate coins, 2 separate choices. The schoolmistress nodded toward them and kept collecting from the next people in line. No one applauded, no one gasped. Sylvia was grateful for that. She and Thad took their supper to a table near the window. Her box held roast beef, brown bread, pickled beets, and a wedge of apple pie she had again bought from somebody who knew more about pastry than she did. Thad inspected it, still refusing to bake. "I have principles. I respect them. You respect not being poisoned. That too." They ate while ordinary conversation moved around them. A rancher complained about late hay. 2 children argued over whose turn it was to fetch water. Amos told a story from the winter roundups and made it longer each time someone challenged a detail. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the gift. Sylvia realized she had once believed belonging would feel like an enormous door opening. It did not. It felt like somebody passing the salt without deciding first whether she deserved a place at the table. After supper, she helped clear the boxes. When she reached for hers, the charcoal gray hood was still inside, exactly where she had left it. She lifted it out and put it on before they stepped into the cold. Outside, the night had gone sharp and clear. Stars hung over Cinder Wells. Old snow along the boardwalk reflected the lamplight in dull patches. Thad stood beside her without reaching for her. "I got a letter from Spearfish yesterday," Sylvia said. "Work. Fence crew east of town wants me for 3 weeks after the thaw. Good pay, better than last autumn. You taking it?" "Probably." He nodded. "Then you should." She turned toward him. "That easy?" No. I would rather you were closer." His honesty warmed her more than a grand declaration would have. But wanting you close is not the same as deciding where you belong." Sylvia smiled. "You did learn something. Cost enough. Worth it?" Thad considered her. "Yes." She stepped nearer. "Lantern drawer keeping you through spring. Looks that way. Calving will be busy. And after, depends on work. Depends on you. Depends on me. That sounds inconveniently uncertain. I was told once not to make decisions for other people. Wise advice. Severe teacher. Sylvia raised one brow. Cruel student. He laughed, and the sound came easier now than it had in September. Then Thad lowered his head and kissed her forehead. No urgency, no claim, just warmth against cold skin. When he straightened, Sylvia reached for his hand first. His fingers closed around hers. Only after she threaded hers through them, they started toward the livery, walking slowly because the boards were slick in places. "So what happens in spring?" Thad asked. Sylvia glanced at him. "I take the spearfish work. I meant after that. You worried I will disappear? I am trying not to ask badly. You are improving." He waited. Sylvia let him. Then she squeezed his hand. "After that, we decide what road makes sense. Together, if we both still want it. I do. You are several weeks early. I have always been impatient about some things. Not all, no." The schoolhouse door opened behind them, sending a square of warm light across the street, before closing again. Inside, the glass jar remained on the front table with 2 new silver dollars among all the others. At the bottom of Sylvia's emptied supper box, nothing remained. The hood was back on her head, because she had chosen to wear it against the March wind, and as she walked beside Thad with her hand in his, she understood at last that being chosen had never meant standing still until somebody reached for her. It meant being free to reach back.